For people in a lot of different places and circumstances, it's not always easy to get a data job. So in this video, I'm going to break down some tips and strategies I have to make yourself stand out and to maximize your chances of landing a job regardless of your experience level. I'm Richard and this is Richard on Data. Before we get started, a shout out to a few of my subscribers who commented on a community post that I made. This topic was actually requested by multiple people, and so here we are. And so if there are any topics that y'all would like me to cover, leave me a note down in the comments below and I'll make them into higher priorities. Then if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. At least 70 to 80% of my views come from people who aren't subscribed to my channel. So take a moment to do that. Just take a fraction of a second after that to smash the like button, and then let's get to it. So we're kind of gonna move upward with some of these tips, but we're going to start with tips that are applicable to people with the lowest amount of experience possible. And so this all starts with getting a college degree. Ultimately, the goal here, and with every tip and strategy in this video, is to open the most possible doors for yourself. So what we're trying to do is to minimize the number of things that employers are going to rule you out over and to maximize the positive qualities that you have going for you. And I did a whole video about this, but while it is possible to get a data job without a college degree, it's not going to be easy. And so honestly, the higher up that you go on the ladder of education, the better off you're going to be. A bachelor's degree is going to be dramatically better than having no degree at all. A master's degree is going to put you in a better position than having just a bachelor's. And while I wouldn't recommend to anybody to go get a PhD just to make their prospects of getting a job afterwards easier, if that's something that you're already going for your own personal reasons, you're probably going to have the easiest time of anyone. And to be honest, for data science or for data engineering, the actual field that you're in probably doesn't matter all that much as long as you're in the ballpark. I've seen some interesting backgrounds from people over the years. So the best fields you could go into are probably statistics or computer science, but things like math, economics, business, physics, those are all good fields too. But then putting education aside, eventually you have to get your foot in the door. And the hardest time that you'll ever have getting experience is when you have no experience yet to bring to the table. And so this is where you might have to get a little creative. Just to give a personal story here, when I was doing my master's, I had connections with a couple of my professors as well as with somebody that I'd done a previous internship with. Now that internship wasn't even necessarily data related, but these connections had their own connections who had problems and essentially data related projects, which I ended up being able to rope myself into, get involved and help out. And these things netted me useful experience that later down the road I could speak to. Plus I got some money out of it, and who doesn't love money? But these are the sorts of things that you sort of have to proactively seek out. So it's kind of true at this stage that beggars can't be choosers, and so you might have to do some sort of weird stuff. And this isn't also the time to be worried about money, because that's going to come later, trust me. This might even mean reaching out to people in your network and seeing if anybody has coding or data related challenges that they need help with. Now, you might go to someplace like GitHub or Kaggle and try to do some data projects there. I'm not as big of a fan of that strategy. It's much better to do real world projects for real people, and I'll explain why that is later. But this option is certainly better than nothing. Another option that you could try is to set up a profile on Upwork or Fiverr and then advertise. So if you don't know what those platforms are, they're basically places where you can set up a profile and then bid on freelance work. Again, if you don't have all that much experience, this isn't necessarily the easiest thing to land, and I understand that. But because you don't have as much experience, you are going to be able to offer lower rates than all the other competitors out there, so you will have that going for you. And honestly, if you just think of this kind of as an opportunity to take skills that you've been acquiring and put them to practice, just opportunities where you can learn more and sharpen those skills and just put them into practice and make stories out of it, I can almost guarantee by doing that kind of thing, you'll learn way more than you will in school. So you start doing stuff like that, and then over time, your resume is starting to get padded with some actual things. Ideally, you can even set up a GitHub portfolio, and then you have something that you can point people to where you can share actual code that you've written. Now, I've personally applied for jobs before and been a competitor against other people, and then would hear later down the road what gave me an edge. And I've also sat on the other side of that table and interviewed people for open data positions. And you would be absolutely shocked how many people out there are completely unable to communicate anything about the work they've done. I'm talking they don't understand what the business problem even was, what the impact of their work was. They can't communicate what the data was or what the structure of it looked like in a way that makes sense. Any even basic stuff like that. Anytime that I'm telling a story to someone involving something that I did with data, there's 4, maybe 5 pieces to this. I try to provide the backstory and the context. I describe the problem in detail. I describe the data that we were working with and whatever challenges resulted from it. I describe the solution that I tried to come up with and work on. And then lastly, this is probably the most important piece, I describe what the impact was. Often you're not necessarily going to be able to observe that and see it realized to its full extent, but at least be able to talk about what the hoped for, desired impact is. Now, it's really easy over time, especially as you start gaining more experience, to really start forgetting this stuff. Like, you can really easily get caught off guard when, let's say you're in an interview and somebody asks you to describe a past project you worked on, just to forget a lot of these little details. And the people interviewing you don't have all this context that you do. So I really recommend whenever you do a data project, sit down with a pen and paper or a Word document and just write all this stuff down like you were explaining it to a 5th grader. Just even being able to explain previous work that you've done will make you stand out, trust me. So far we've talked about things that I think apply to basically everyone, no matter what kind of job you're going for, whether that's data analysis, data science, or data engineering. We've covered education, getting some experience, and being able to communicate about that experience. A reasonable next question then is, what actual skills should you try to develop? This one is obviously going to depend a little bit on what type of job you're going for, but there are some commonalities here. What I will say is that in a lot of academic programs, especially for statistics or economics, people end up learning R. There's different reasons for that, which I'm not going to get into that debate in this video, but there's no question out there that while it depends on industry somewhat, more overall companies use Python than R. Python is already a pretty critical programming language to have under your belt. But yeah, for data science or analytics, I really do recommend getting exposure to Python if that's not something that you've already gotten from your course curriculum. And now there are multiple ways that you could go about doing this. Again, I think something like Upwork or Fiverr or going through connections in your own community is probably your best bet. Failing that, do something like GitHub or Kaggle projects. Now, I'm not necessarily convinced something like doing a course and getting a certification moves the needle all that much, but again, that's way better than nothing. So now let's talk a little bit more broadly about necessary skills. And now this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I think there's a lot of value in data scientists knowing more engineering and data engineers knowing a little bit more data science. So starting with data science, some of the core foundational skills that I think you should learn are statistics, SQL, and one of R or Python, but again, definitely a preference to Python on that one. And now a key weakness that I see all the time with entry-level data scientists is lack of exposure to, and sometimes even a lack of awareness of the considerations that go into things like building data pipelines or putting models into production. That's where if you're able to get some kind of exposure to one of the major cloud providers, that is Azure, AWS, or GCP, that's really going to make you stand out among entry-level data scientists. Not just because it's pretty rare among entry-level people to have those kinds of qualifications, but it just gets your brain moving in different directions beyond just whipping some model up in a Jupyter notebook. No, like how do you actually get that into some kind of environment where you can serve it to other human beings and monitor it? This is one of the instances where I do think certifications are pretty valuable because this isn't necessarily the easiest hands-on experience to get outside of a job, and I'll have links to some resources in the description. Now, I'm not a data engineer myself, so I can't speak quite as much to ways to stand out in that space, but there are definitely some commonalities that I've noticed over the years. For one thing, it's pretty common for engineers to have to work with analysts and data scientists, and sometimes it can come off like people who are speaking two completely different languages. Part of that is a communication thing, sure, but sometimes a lot of it comes down to just having wildly different skill sets. So for data engineers, part of your core skill set involves different programming languages, different operating systems, databases and data warehousing, all that good stuff. But if you have some bandwidth, it might be valuable to learn some things about statistics and machine learning and data analytics. Learning those things will sort of help you become more full stack and versatile, but when you actually go to apply your skills and collaborate with other people, as you'll have to, it'll help you just bridge those gaps a lot more easily. So just to recap where we are, hopefully by this point you have some reasonable education, you've got a little bit of experience under your belt, even if you got it through some unconventional means. You have the ability to communicate that experience, and you have some core foundational skills. That's a pretty reasonable place to be starting from, even if you're just looking for your first entry-level job. Now, the last point I'm going to make is again going to be a little counterintuitive, but it's not to apply for just every possible position that you see out there, but to slow down and be a little bit more methodical. There are tons of bad data analytics, data science, and data engineering jobs out there. They're in teams that are terribly managed. They'll have you do painfully tedious crap for years, or they're just in companies or industries that you don't want to work for. Now, I want to be clear, that's not all of them. While there are some really bad jobs out there are some amazing ones out there. So this is where it might be worth taking some time to think, and this is a little bit harder if you're brand new, so maybe leverage your network a little bit to help come up with this. But what does an ideal job look like for you? Like, do you have a favorite industry? Do you have a favorite company that you really want to work for? Do you even have like a real desired type of work or type of impact that you want to make? To be fair, nothing out there is perfect, and nothing is going to be an ideal match to things that you have in your head. But at least if you have some kind of concrete idea of what you're looking for, when you see something that's a better match for you, it's just going to stand out a little bit more easily for you. When you go see jobs out there that you read their job description and they're full of red flags, they demand perfect unicorns, the job sounds more boring than watching paint dry, just don't even apply to that position. Just take your time and your energy and reinvest it into things which are a better fit for you. So that could look like applying for those jobs which are going to be better for you, honing the necessary skills for them, writing a good cover letter, investing some more time into interview prep, just things like that. So I'll leave it there. These have been a number of tips and strategies that in some ways I've applied myself over the years. In some ways I wish I'd applied more and I wish that I knew when I was just getting started. And in some instances, I've sat on the other side of the table and wish people that I was interviewing would have applied more themselves. To say one thing to wrap all of this up, it's just don't give up. So I know that it can be really hard out there. But at the same time, data science, data engineering, and AI are white hot right now, and there is plenty of opportunity out there. All you have to do is get over that first hurdle and break in. After you get that first job, you end up getting some experience under your belt and some good stories that you can tell. I can virtually guarantee you from that point forward, it's only going to get easier. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button. If you hated it, I guess you're free to hit the dislike button. And then leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Do any of these tips or strategies resonate with you? Did you apply any of them yourself? Do you have any just unique things that you did that helped you break into your first data job? Let me know. Then I'll see you all in the not so distant future. Until then, Richard on data.